In a world full of old secrets and untold tales, Ethiopia is a shining light of enigma and respect. Ethiopia's highlands hold a treasure, crafted not from gold or jewels, but from paper and ink. Have you ever come across something so mysterious and old that it made you feel like you were in an action movie? Picture yourself with the centuries-old Ethiopian Bible in your hands. Ethiopia is full of secrets that have been around for a very long time. Its civilization goes back to the beginning of time. It is the sole African nation that has remained uncolonized, and its history encompasses tales of Ham, the son of Noah. This story's threads go through history and join with Jewish traditions to create a complex structure of heritage and belief. However, today's story goes beyond the borders of this ancient land to look at the Ethiopian Bible, a treasure that it protects. Not just any scripture, this is a history book that came before even the famous King James Bible. It has 88 books that cover all of humankind's questions about God. Many people are familiar with the King James Bible, which has 66 books. On the other hand, the Ethiopic Bible contains texts not found in any other religion. It gives us a look into a deep and unique spiritual history. It's not just the fact that the Ethiopic Bible is old or has a lot of books that makes it interesting. Its real interest stems from the story of how it came to be. Ethiopia didn't adopt Christianity as a new religion. It was already a thriving faith by the 4th century. This revelation shows a society where Christianity was deeply rooted in the culture, long before it was spread by outside forces. By the 6th century, Ethiopia was known as a Christian realm, where people could go to escape religious persecution. In Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which is called Tewado, is a symbol of this long-lasting faith. It existed before the Catholic ministry did. One of the earliest illustrated Christian manuscripts was found in a remote Ethiopian monastery in 2010. This shows that the country has a lot of religious history. This gospel, written in Ge'ez, an old Ethiopian script, gives us a real link to a time when faith and tradition came together in the highlands of Ethiopia. Imagine this: a ruler from Ethiopia, who was thought to be the Queen of Sheba, went to see King Solomon in Jerusalem in the 10th century BC to ask for his advice. In the traditional Bible, this event is briefly mentioned. But there is a shift in the story that most people don't notice. The story goes beyond just their meeting. They were said to have had a son named Menelik, who became the first emperor of Ethiopia. It's not just a story. New genetic studies suggest a link between Ethiopians and people from Egypt and Israel who lived around the same time as Queen Sheba. Here's where it really makes you think. Even though it has a lot of stories and historical connections, the Ethiopian Bible isn't part of the main Christian canon. It seems to have been pushed to the side, which makes you wonder why. This Bible isn't just a bunch of religious books. It's proof of Ethiopia's long-standing Christian heritage, kept alive over many years. Let us go back and look at how the Bible we know today came to be. At first, different versions and interpretations were going around. We didn't always have the Bible as a standard book. It was actually very important in its history when texts were translated from Hebrew to other languages like Latin. In this process, St. Jerome was very important. In the 4th century, he wrote the Vulgate, which became an important text for the Western Church. But the story gets more complicated when you learn that many stories told about Jesus in the 1st century were not based on real events. Think about the arguments and confusion that would happen as these stories spread, with people trying to figure out what was true and what wasn't. We are still trying to figure out what happened hundreds of years later, and the Ethiopian Bible is a very important part of the puzzle. Doesn't history interest you? Imagine a world full of many texts about Jesus, each with a different story. There would be no quick way to tell which ones were telling the truth. That sounds like a way to make things confusing, right? In fact, that's what happened. Many writings were true at that time, but a lot of them were not. The church was full of them. This made church leaders really scratch their heads. It was up to them to figure out which stories were true and which ones were more like old fan fiction. So they got together at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and the First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD to figure out this biblical enigma. What was their mission? Choosing only the best parts of reality for the New Testament. The rules were pretty simple. The writings had to be from the 1st century, by Jesus' disciples or witnesses to events, and fit in with the rest of the Bible's story. Now we're in the 1600s. The Vulgate had been around for 500 years, but there were still a lot of different Bible versions that were making some noise. Then King James I showed up. He was very angry about this religious mistake. He wasn't just looking for a new Bible translation. He wanted one that would end the religious arguments and, let's be honest, make him look more like a king. He then put together a dream team of 47 scholars and gave each group the job of carefully reading different translations. These guys spent 7 years reading a lot of texts. They had to follow a strict no-bias policy and use a lot of tools to make sure their work was as close to the original text as possible. The king and his religious advisors were amazed at how consistent the work was across all the different groups that worked on it. They felt like God had a hand in the process. After many years of hard work by scholars, the King James Bible was born. The massive book aimed to unite people and fortify their faith. The King James Bible made a big splash when it came out in 1611. Because of the magic of the printing press, this edition became a huge hit very quickly and was easily attainable by many. But here's the problem. Some texts were ignored when the King James Bible was being made. And this happened even earlier with the Vulgate during the time of Saint Jerome. These texts did not make it into what many Christians read today. However, the Ethiopian Bible kept these texts, making its collection of scriptures bigger. Now let's talk about the big question. Why does everyone look down on the Ethiopian Bible so much? The Ethiopian Bible is a mix, but one crucial aspect is its inclusion of pseudepigrapha. These are not part of most Christian traditions' official scripture playlist, so they get the thumbs down. Scholars and theologians believe that what didn't make it into the main Bibles lacked that divine spark. Different authors have written these pieces over time, but their goals didn't always match the original spirit. And to be honest, it makes sense to keep the record straight. Imagine if someone wrote a book today that said bad things about Kobe Bryant's athleticism. We'd all be upset right now because, come on, it's Kobe. Now, though, a few hundred years from now, people might start to wonder if the basketball legend was really all that. It's important to stop these lies before they spread so that future generations don't get the wrong idea. People in Ethiopia argue about their two versions of the Bible, which are called the narrow canon and the broader canon. Before we go any further, let's talk about what a canon is. Think of it as the official guide, the gold standard that decides what gets into the show. In other words, the Ethiopian Bible's main canon is very big, with 81 books. Along with the Epistle to Clement and a big stack of Synodos books, it holds books like Enoch, Jubilees, and the Maccabees trilogy. Today, this broader canon is the star of the show and gets a little more attention. Then there's the narrow canon, which was approved by Emperor Haile Selassie. Stay tuned as we learn more about this fascinating literary world and the many layers of history and belief that make the Ethiopian Bible a spiritual treasure trove. Okay, let's get started. A very important person in Ethiopian history, Emperor Haile Selassie, decided to make the Ethiopian Bible shorter. This is called the narrow canon. He said that this was the official and last copy of their holy book. But I'm not going to add to the trouble by going into his reasons in detail. Let's just say it's a touchy subject that could lead to a heated argument in the comments. Anyway, if you're interested, look him up on the web and see what you discover. Just so you know, it's a pretty deep hole. With only 72 books, the narrow canon is a bit light on content compared to the wider version, which has more books. Also, the broader canon is like the extended edition with all the extras, but it hasn't been printed since the early 1900s. So you can see that these two versions cause some trouble with each other, which is another reason why the Ethiopian Bible isn't accepted by everyone. Let's talk about how the Ethiopian canon has changed over time. It's important to keep in mind that the Bible isn't just one book. It's more like a collection of stories and writings from different times. This is where things get tricky. There have been arguments among different religious groups, even the most popular ones, about what should and shouldn't be in the holy books. These arguments are often based on personal or theological beliefs. Much of the Bible as we know it was written in the 4th and 5th centuries AD. By that time, Christianity in Ethiopia had already started to move away from the traditions found in Europe and the wider Mediterranean region. Also, guess what? Over time, that gap has grown even bigger. The Ethiopian Bible is a lot like the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. It has a lot of the same books, plus a few extra Old Testament books. It's likely that these additions came about in the last few hundred years BC. They were added after the New Testament, but before the Old Testament. Then at the end of the New Testament, there are a few extra books that give information about the history and structure of the Ethiopian Church. The language of the Ethiopian Bible could be another problem on the way to being accepted by everyone. Because it's written in Ge'ez, it's not easy for people from other religions to understand, which doesn't help its case in the global religious community. Besides problems with translation and different traditions, there is a more controversial factor at play: politics. In the early years of Christianity, the Roman emperor didn't just think about religion. He also thought about politics and power. What this meant was that any religious texts that didn't fit with the empire's story were ignored. In fact, it is said that the Bishop of Rome told priests to destroy any scrolls that didn't follow the rules. That being said, those sneaky priests did have a plan. They hid many of these valuable scrolls in vats, which were later found near the Dead Sea in the 1940s. This discovery helped explain why the Ethiopian Bible and other versions don't always agree. It showed that one tradition has a more complete Bible, while the other has one that has been picked out in certain ways. People are becoming more and more interested in the Ethiopian Bible these days. People are eager to find out what makes it special and what truths it may hold. The Christians in Ethiopia aren't resting on their laurels either. They're stepping up and translating the Bible into more languages. They're also pushing for scholarly research to help more people understand and read it. Let's also take a moment to appreciate how strong this text is. The Ethiopian Bible has been through a lot. It has been attacked by Muslims, fought back against Italy, and even burned down in the 1930s, destroying the church of a monastery. The fact that it is still around adds to its mysterious appeal and long-lasting history.